Hi, my name is Roderick Kefferpütz, and I'm the director of the EU office of the Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung. You are listening to the Böll Europe podcast. In case you're listening to us for the first time, we are the German Green Political Foundation, affiliated with the German political party Alliance 90, the Greens. Our EU office in Brussels represents the foundation vis-à-vis European and international institutions, associations, non-governmental organizations, and media. Find out more about our work on our website, eu.böll.org. Today, on the Böll Europe podcast, we have Reinhard Bütikofer with us. Reinhard was a member of the European Parliament for 15 years and ended his parliamentary chapter this summer. He sat on numerous committees, such as the Committee for Foreign Affairs, as well as the Industry Committee, and he was the chair of the China delegation. As the co-chair of the European Green Party and former chair of the German Green Party, he also played an important role in shaping green policies in Europe. Currently, Reinhard is a senior fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis and co-chair of the German-Taiwanese Dialogue Platform. In this episode, we will delve into his insights on the past and future of the European Union, the trajectory of the European Green Deal, as well as the changes that we are seeing with regards to the world order. Thank you, Reinhard, for being here on our podcast. It's great to have you. You've spent a lifetime in local politics, national politics, European politics, and now you're out of politics for half a year already. How does it feel?
Well, I'm certainly still a political person and interested in politics, but I'm fully convinced that I took the right decision, which, as you probably know, I didn't take just before the election. I already decided 5 years ago that this would be it for me. And I have retired from party politics, from parliamentary politics, but I'm still working on the same kind of issues, transatlantic issues, EU-China, Indo-Pacific, global gateway. I mean, the intersection of foreign policy, trade policy, industrial policy, that sort of thing, just without a team.
So you have more work on your own shoulders, damn it. I mean, you spent 3 legislative terms in the European Parliament, 7 years as co-chair of the European Green Party, and you've seen so many changes. Looking back on your tenure, how do you reflect on that period? What were the moments or challenges that really stood out for you?
When I came to Brussels first, the Commission President was Barroso, with whom I share, having been a Maoist in the 70s. At the time, he strongly advocated for a perspective on European policymaking that basically signaled Europe would be the perfect paradise on earth if only the member states would stop mingling with all the wise decisions that are being made in Brussels. So there was a prevailing sentiment, there was a widely shared assessment that the European project had to overcome the role that national governments still played. And I felt already at that time that this was doing a disservice to the European cause because, and I still hold the same opinion today, if you can't mobilize national energy for the European project, it will fail. I think the Bundesverfassungsgericht had it right in one of their famous decisions when they said it's an entity, it's a political entity of a dual character. It's not a federation. It's not a federation. It's not a Staatenbund. It's not a Bundesstaat. It's a Staatenverbund. So, an entity of a very particular character, which can thrive only if the sometimes contradictory impulses are brought together. I think that is ancient history by today. The transformation of the institutional perspective has been fundamental. Today, everybody understands that you have to mobilize the member states' capitals and the member states' public opinion and the member states' parliaments and the member states' economic decision makers to really make progress in Europe. So that was one change for a more realistic perspective. That I think Juncker already represented. But Juncker, for instance, was never really interested in industrial policy. So there Barroso was even better than Juncker was after him. Juncker didn't understand the need for a concerted European effort, coordinated here in Brussels, but of course relying also on input from all the actors to make Europe ready for future competition. The US seemed to be a perennial, benevolent hegemon and partner. China wasn't the kind of threat that they are today. So Europe, Juncker understood that Europe had to find new ways of making progress, but he was not aware of the imminent geopolitical risks that were growing around us.
But a lot of others weren't aware either in member states. If you look at Germany, Angela
Sure.
Merkel, who came out with a biography now.
Well, let's not talk about the dull books. I'm not blaming him in particular, but I think he represented that attitude, even though he was quite good in the way in which he worked with the European Parliament, for instance. He was also quite inclusive, I would say. I recall that he started the connectivity conversation. I recall that he initiated a council decision on security collaboration with Asian nations.
The idea of Weltpolitikfähigkeit, that came also from him, didn't it?
Yes, but he was not going as far as his successor then, von der Leyen, went, by explicitly stating that she wanted to lead a geopolitical commission. And I would indeed say that this shift was probably the most momentous change that I've seen over those 15 years. And Europe, under Juncker and under von der Leyen, started to try to implement the ambition of being a global player in the one field where Europe is really strong, namely the field of trade.
Yeah.
Where we have commission competency and where we don't need unanimity among the member states.
I like the points that you mentioned. They particularly pertain to the two big issues that you worked on, the changing of the world order and at the same time the green industrial transformation. And now you've put a lot on that on von der Leyen, but was it really all leadership, or was it also just and I think you mentioned some of that, the different context. Because under Juncker and Barroso, we had the economic crisis, the Great Recession, the whole issue with Greece. So Europe was way too inward focused, was it very inward focused at the moment? And because of that, it did not see the geopolitical shifts, perhaps, or was not making the steps necessary for the green transformation?
Look, we advocated the European Green Deal already in 2009. That was the central topic for our green campaign in that election. So I would say it was possible to look beyond.
Yeah.
Um, but in politics, you are not successful by having good ideas. You're only successful if these good ideas take hold and find support from important constituencies. And in 2019, when von der Leyen came into office, we had this high watermark of environmental mobilization. We had the Fridays for Future movement Europe-wide, hundreds of thousands of young people getting engaged. That changed the context, that changed the political environment, that created an opportunity to open policymaking towards such perspectives. And then, of course, it did take leadership to,
Move it forward.
grasp the moment and to pick it up and to try to transform the business as usual agenda that had prevailed before that. So it was certainly not just individuals; it was a complex development. It also, of course, reflected the fact that increasingly businesses started understanding that there wouldn't be any future competitiveness without sustainability. I mean, when was it that we wrote a report on industrial policy? I think it was 2014 or so, where we spoke about a renaissance of industry for a sustainable Europe. That was a direction that was not just a fancy idea of some green politicians. That resonated with business community actors. So that certainly also played a role.
And at the same time, we're now finding ourselves again in a different context with the economy, not the outlook for the economy, not looking so great, great geopolitical turmoil in the world, and an increasing number of actors that are saying, well, we need to return to business as usual that we had pre 2019, and we can delay or get rid of parts of the Green Deal. I mean, how do you look at that political constellation now?
Well, that's a very difficult question, and I don't think it's possible to answer that without also talking about mistakes that we made.
Who do you mean by we?
The Greens.
Okay.
The Green Group, the Green parties, the environmentally motivated people.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I think it's been a mistake that's been made quite frequently to try to sell the transformative agenda under the slogan, "Here comes the new world."
The paradise.
Maybe not the paradise, but we have to reinvent the world. This is a progressive task. We will change as much as we can. That may resonate with a certain part of the progressive electorate. But what with the other half of society? The most successful Green politician ever, Winfried Kretschmann in Baden-Württemberg, took a different approach. He told his gospel in a language that resonated also with some conservative voters. He would, and the Swabian people are famous Europe-wide for being extremely parsimonious. So spendthrift policies will never succeed in Baden-Württemberg. But he would use exactly that traditionally ingrained sentiment by arguing, look, your grandfather probably told you to not spend overly much. And he was right. But the same applies to the natural capital. The same applies to environment, to biodiversity. If we spend too much today, we won't have enough left for your grandchildren. So he accepted that you need to talk a language that resonates also with people that don't necessarily bet on changing everything as the best solution for all the problems that we encounter. That combining a progressive agenda with an acknowledgement that some traditional values have a positive role to play, that has been very successful in Baden-Württemberg. And the lack of doing the same elsewhere has shown that it comes to weaker results.
Yeah.
So that would be, I think, one mistake we made. If you want to move the whole society forward, you cannot organize half a society against the other half. You have to bridge the gap in the middle.
Yeah.
And when the government that just fell down in Berlin came into office, they said, well, we are the progressive government. So you are not a government for the others. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that was one mistake, I would say. Yeah. Then I also believe that we made mistakes by framing some of our issues in a kind of naturalist way. To this day, Greens put up posters that say, protect nature. Nature needs no protection. We're not protecting nature. We're not protecting the climate. We're not protecting biodiversity. We're protecting our society and our citizens against the detrimental effects of ignoring the physical limitations to what we do.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is a human-centered task. This is for the public good and not for nature. I think that was also a mistake. And I would also say that at some points we lost trust because we relied too much on the expectation to use public positions of influence, public office, to enact policies that would have needed a broader basis. Abraham Lincoln famously said, with public opinion, you can do almost everything. And without public opinion, you can do almost nothing. I think the fundamentals are all there.
Yeah.
But I would think it might be a major mistake to just believe citizens don't want to change. The burden is on us to win them. And we should not ask citizens only to trust us. We should also make it a principle that we trust citizens. So the agenda that we have to find, that we have to shape, can be shaped in coordination with people of different backgrounds.
Empowering them to be actors
Be
in the
actors and
transformation.
bring their wisdom and bring their perspectives to the table and make it more successful.
But it still belies the question, how do you deal with the rollback? I mean, we have a lot of policies in place now, end of the combustion engine by 2035, the deforestation law been delayed by 1 year. How do you deal with that?
Well, there's but one rule in a democracy. You need majority. And a teaching from the New Testament that I like to quote, where the apostles are being sent to the world to spread the gospel, and they're told, talk to the Romans as a Roman, and to the Greeks as a Greek, and to the Jews as a Jew, which means talk to people in the language that they understand, instead of insisting that they have to understand the language that you prefer to talk.
Yeah.
And so instead of just reiterating what we've always said, I think we have to emphasize more how the policies that we advocate are not just protecting, quote unquote, the environment or whatever, but are offering solutions to the social issues, to the economic issues. Talking renewables, for instance. There's a great case to be made for renewables with regard to climate, but I could equally make a perfect case for renewables without ever mentioning climate. I could make a case on the basis of jobs and employment, of innovation, of
energy security,
and national security.
Yeah.
We saw that with a dependency on Russian gas. Not being dependent has a national security dimension. So you have to try to answer the questions that people ask instead of insisting that they should listen to the answers that you prefer to give.
Yeah. Which brings me to the other issue is you have always looked at industrial policy also from an international perspective, and you've always been engaged in international issues. I mean, you sat in the Security and Defense Committee, subcommittee, now soon to be a full committee. You sat in the Foreign Affairs Committee. You've been chair of the China delegation. If you look at the world order right now, what are the trends that you see? Where are we heading towards? And what role should Europe play in that?
I see a lot of trends that are terribly intertwined and contradictory at the same time. And I do not see a dominating trend that has already won the day. So there are people out there that argue that European industry is going to go down the drain because of much stronger competition from China. I don't believe that. I would say even when we look at our weak spot, which is the automotive sector at the moment, there are things that we could do to fight back, to push back. There are people out there that say the multilateral world order based on the principles of the UN Charter and international law is ancient history by now, and we're on the verge of creating a new disorder where regional superpowers control their environment and then compete globally against each other. And a lot of countries that would like to have agency are not going to have agency because they're too small and not powerful enough.
Might makes right.
The return to the principle that Thucydides described in his Peloponnesian War, where he says, the powerful act as they will and the weak suffer as they must. I don't believe that this is an ingrained trajectory. There are, of course, a lot of actors that push in that direction, but at the same time, I see a lot of pushback. And maybe we have to get more involved with other countries' perspective. Give you an example. I'm not a complete fan, to say it cautiously, of the Indian Prime Minister, but I have been to several of the conferences that Indian think tank that is very close to his government has organized in Delhi. And when we would ask them why they would not speak up more about Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, some of them answered, well, did we hear anything from you when China attacked us on the Himalaya front? Did you care? Did you pay attention? And Annalena our foreign minister, has said very much a similar thing that she was told in Africa. And I believe that the basic principle that might makes right is something that the vast majority of countries would rather not be confronted with because everybody has a more powerful neighbor.
Yeah.
So are we aligning with others? Sometimes I have the impression that we're just working to defend our own ass, or to defend our own privilege. We were the industrialized nations of the world, and all of a sudden there is a lot of competition from other places, and we don't like that in particular. And how can we defend what we have? I mean, that's an illusionary agenda. That's not going to happen. But we insist, no, we want to have it our way. That's not happening. And I believe that one of the failures in our ambition to pursue a global policy lies exactly here, where we do not team up enough with erstwhile partners, hypothetical partners, because we don't pay enough attention. Another example, we complained a lot about Biden's IRA. IRA might be gone once Trump takes over.
But we also always said that the US needs to do more on climate policy.
Yes, but well, it was a particularly protectionist way of doing it, I would still say. So we had some reason for complaining, but the fact was the Japanese complained also, the Koreans complained, Australia complained, Taiwan complained, the Brits complained, the Canadians complained, everybody complained. Everybody went to Washington individually trying to find some small favor. The Koreans had proposed that maybe we should team up. Like-minded countries that are in a similar situation with the US want to partner with the US, but don't want to be put into an unfavorable position, maybe share some effort. There are some positive examples in that regard. For instance, the last commission, in its waning days, sent a delegation to Japan to negotiate cooperation on the hydrogen technology, on the basis of the assessment that neither the Japanese nor the Europeans on their own could hope to withstand the pressure from mighty China. But maybe if we team up, we can. So maybe we have to look beyond the traditional collaborations among the G7 or across the Atlantic. Maybe we have to widen the scope of partnering that we pursue. I believe there are many options. Global Gateway being one of them. I'm very positive that finally we have a commissioner for Global Gateway. I hope it will be translated into real action.
Yeah.
And of course, we have to work on the weaknesses and that we have allowed. The German case is particularly difficult because we have gotten accustomed to relying on basically three outsourcing successes: outsourcing our cheap energy supply to Russia, outsourcing uh, security to the US, and taking advantage of an ever growing, ever open Chinese market. Well,
Those days are over.
very surprisingly, that's no longer the case. Uh, and that means to we have to tackle those weaknesses. So, for instance, I believe the new commission will have to make a real effort. I'm hoping Commissioner Kubilius will contribute to that. I hope that von der Leyen is going to take the lead and tell us a coordination of making Europe more self-reliant with regard to its own security. Now, people are discussing, should we spend 3% of GDP on defense? Maybe we need to do that, but then we could also not forget that we're wastefully spending at the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Even 10 years ago, Juncker argued that we could save a lot of money with the same level of procurement if we had more competitive practices.
Yeah,
Instead of
sharing.
Pooling and sharing was one, or smart spending in the context of NATO.
Yeah.
So yes, and I believe we just have to tackle those weaknesses. I believe the core weaknesses that Europe has at the moment are not being enough united vis-a-vis China, not being enough united over the complex transformation, and we've talked some of that.
Yeah.
Not being open enough to collaboration with a so-called global south and partners elsewhere around the globe. And of course, we also have a problem that I think is very fundamental and very hard to address, about the disruptive effect of a growing disparity within our societies. Many years ago, a member of the German Constitutional Court, Mr. Bückenförder, wrote a remarkable minority opinion dissenting from a decision of the majority of the court, where he argued that you cannot have equality among citoyens if you allow inequality to grow too big. And we have not been able to tackle that, and this is a major cause for instability and for also populist success. The left has tried to tackle the problem with a language that is yesterday's language. And I think that is not going to be possible. And Greens have tackled some of that, but from too narrow an angle, I would say. You need to find a language that is capable of uniting our societies in dealing with these issues. And I believe that this language needs to make use of the terms like competition and responsibility. These are originally core values of the bourgeois society, but they are being undermined, and there is a certain tendency towards a new feudal system that denies a lot of citizens a voice and respect
and active part,
and an active part. So I think that is an issue that has to be tackled on all kinds of different levels. But the first challenge is finding a language in which we can address that without alienating all those that we need to have a successful result.
Last question. I think one of the themes that we've come up with is the need for unity, coming together to address these challenges. And you mentioned Barroso talking about, well, if we only got rid of those pesky EU member states and if we just had a European federation, then it would all work out. And at the same time, unity right now in Europe is difficult. Where is leadership? Germany is in an election. The French government has fallen. There's a lot of governments that don't necessarily have a majority in the parliament. Poland has its presidential elections. So is it all now on the shoulders of the Commission, or what formats, what constellations do you see that can bring this unity together?
I would argue that the different priorities that we have to tackle may not all depend on the same kind of assortment of players. When I think about hard security, I can't imagine how we will be successful without having the Weimar Triangle at the center, the Polish and the French and the Germans.
And the UK on top of that.
The UK should be a partner, but within the EU, those three governments must drive it. When I look at China policy, it may be a different grouping. I would say maybe we could have another triangle between Commission and the European Parliament and the NB8, the Nordic Baltic 8 countries, that have found a particularly resonant voice on the dangers of imperialist aggression against Europe. When we look at the issue of industrial transformation, we might need other partners. So don't try to tackle everything with the same approach.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the challenges to innovation could be tackled by creating a strong alliance of regions. That used to be an idea that Lothar Späth had 30, 40 years ago to bring together high-tech and industrialized and export-oriented regions to form a coalition of the driving forces instead of allowing a situation where every one of those drivers are being held back by others that want to drag their feet. So maybe you have to be innovative also in creating different formats of policy making.
I like that. And I guess finishing on that note, we could copy almost the EU motto of united in diversity, making it united in diverse formats or coalitions or constellations. Yeah. Reinhard, thank you so much. Great having you on our podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Böll Europe podcast with Reinhard Bütikofer. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. And if you'd like to know more about our work, do check out our website, eu.böll.org. Until the next episode, goodbye.